This is Heather Wallace, TTA 240 design project. I'm doing The Dark is Rising, which is a kid's book in the Box of Delights vein about a kid, Will Stanton, born on midwinter, who discovers on his 11th birthday that he's the latest in the line of immortals who fight the dark. Cue him being set on a mission to retrieve the Signs of Power. Ornaments before the dark get them, flicking between time periods to do so, as the worst snowstorm in decades hits his small Buckinghamshire village. It's a very loved classic, but has only had a couple of adaptations. One radio in the 90s, one film we do not speak of, and this Christmas a full-bore screen soundscape on BBC Radio by Complicity. But there's no theatre version, and I reckon it would be a perfect piece of spooky magical theatre, as has been done with Box of Delights. Okay, setting the scene. Okay. It's a large cast with 3 time periods illustrated. Will presents as a very ordinary kid, youngest of 9 living on a farm. Then you have Merriman, his mentor, who's basically Merlin, and yes, he does wear that for most of it without the top hat. Hawkin, the walker, a homeless man cursed to bear the sign of bronze. Miss Greythorn / the lady, also the light. Herne the hunter. John Wayland Smith. Right. And the main villain, the Rider, who's one of the Lords of the Dark, who you have to get the cape right for, since he has to have a presence. Okay. The play skips to medieval times on Will's birthday, which I picked the 12th century for, since it's distinctive without going full ice cream cone hats for the ladies or trailing robes for either sex or for the nobility. The Victorian ball, where Will gains the knowledge of grammar. I picked the 1870s just because it looks different from Dickens or the later Ripper era, which are a bit overdone. As the Rider makes a big impact in the story and overall image of the book, he's on pretty much every cover, as you can see, and we get Herne on a horse at the end of the play, so I needed a way to do a horse that can bear a rider, or at least look like it is, and research possible ways to do the horse on stage. Starting with Joey from Warhorse, who's an intensely complicated puppet. Okay. There's the option of making a horse with shields as a side-on view, and someone standing behind it on a box. However, I saw this year's RSC's Richard III, where they made the horse from people, and there's no pictures of it, so I emailed Sian Williams, the movement coordinator of the production, and she details how they did it. This production requires a largish cast, so you've got enough actors to do it, and when it needs to be the rider's horse, you can put the actors in black, and white for Herne's horse, and there's another horse in the production, you can put them in brown for that. Okay, for the Sign of Bronze scene, Will has to set a bit of tree on fire whilst testing out his new powers, and flame on stage is not good and not allowed in several venues, including the venue I'm going to be doing it in, so I researched ways to do it without flame. Projection could work. There's stage flame, which requires a machine, and the silk and fan and lighting that they do outside clubs, but it turns out there's a far cheaper way to do it with a humidifier, some piping to direct the steam, a fan and LEDs. These are the how-tos and my proof of concept. Okay, I'm adapting it for Wilton's Music Hall, which is one of the last Victorian music halls in original condition. The setting and 2-level stage enables you to split the action if required, as well as providing atmosphere. This is the Watermills production of Twelfth Night, which illustrates the use of the stage. and construction pictures of the model. Okay. The book details 3 main settings: the Stanton farmhouse, which is stuffed full of light and Christmas and includes Will's bedroom. Then there's Greythorn Manor, which is the big house in the village and skips between modern day, the setting of the Lights Refuge, which I've interpreted as medieval, and a Victorian ball for when Will gains the knowledge of Grimaire. I went with wood panelling and not so much tapestries, but wanted lighting to indicate time period for this, and it turns out candlelight and gaslight are an identical colour, and for actual candlelight there's plenty of Globe Productions for reference. Then the snowed-in Buckinghamshire countryside. All the snow on stage pictures I could find are of night scenes, so I referenced outdoor photos more for lighting ideas. Because snow is during the daytime is very flat. Okay. A lot of the set design is constrained by the theatre itself. I'm using curtain backdrops and furniture for scene changes as it fits with the theatre, and the story switches back and forth between them quite regularly. I've made the props as minimal as possible because the wing space at Wilton's is tiny. Also, I'd like the potential for it to expand the life of the production beyond one venue, and the minimal factor means you can stuff the entire set and props in one van quite easily. Okay, sound lighting. Sound. I went for a mix between natural and atmospheric. The sound of the outdoors, especially rooks, but I extend this to other birds as well, and the storm are a big part of the atmosphere setting in the book. And then there's music, which is a constant in the book, as Will's family are choristers at a competitive level, is a hobby. And the Christmas Eve scenes are when they go carolling. The rooks are heard as the beginning sound prior to the play, starting to set the scene in the house. The Stanton's farmhouse has Christmas songs on the radio as the book opens, so I went for Mariah Carey as a classic. The door opens to let someone in, and the storm's starting. Later the storm gets worse, it wakes Will up, and then the skylight's broken when a rook flies into it to let the storm in. And, okay. When Will wakes up on his birthday, I wanted it to be very obvious that the world isn't what we know, so this is when I introduced the something weird is going on theme, repeated throughout when magic happens, and picked the bridge of Victor Helly Hutchinson's 1927 Carol Symphony, familiar to anyone who's seen The Box of Delights, as they really mixed it for their titles. When he goes out into the medieval snowscape, it's Birdsong, I recorded in the garden, followed by the sounds of the forge and the rider's horse when he comes across John Wayland Smith and the rider. The rider tries to influence and then scare Will, so weirdness and the horse rearing. Then John Wayland Smith gets him to bugger off. The Hall of the Light appears in the snow, cue weird sound, and then when he goes back into the snow, it's the birds again. When Will gets off the bus from Slough, I use rooks as the theme, as they're very present during his meeting with the Walker/Hawken, and they get understandably spooked when he sets a bit of the tree on fire. Then a bit of the weird music when Merriman appears to stop the fire. The rooks come back when Hawken leaves. On Christmas Eve, they go carolling. Miss Greythorn's a fan of classical, not Mariah Carey, so I put medieval carols on the stereo. The manor time slips from the present day to a Victorian ball. Will is given the Book of Grimaire and absorbs its knowledge by living it. I went with a combo of Celtic, Julie Fowler specifically, and birdsong from a roost locally where all the birds gossip, to invoke the feeling of he learned the language of birds by living it. And then it goes back to the ball, then the present day, and then getting the sign of wood from the fireplace. Okay, so house lights. Farmhouse daylight. Okay. The door opens. Excuse me. And the storm comes through. Door closes and radio comes back in. Okay. And then blackout as everyone goes to bed. Okay, and then the wind in Will's bedroom is getting stronger. Okay. Will turns the lights off, and then the wind gets even stronger, and the window breaks. Okay. His brother comes in and turns the lights on. And they leave for another bedroom. Okay. Will wakes up and it's clear something isn't right. And then Will goes out into the snow. Where he meets the blacksmith. And the rider's there. Okay. Then the rider tries to impress Will. Okay. Fortunately, John Wayland Smith gets him to bugger off. And a door appears in the snow. And Will enters. And Will goes back outside. and then his village reappears, and he goes back into his house. Okay. Will gets it's day before Christmas Eve, and Will gets off the bus from Slough, and cue the rooks. Okay. Will runs into the walker and gets the sign of bronze from him. Okay. Will sets the tree on fire. Okay. Merriman appears to stop it. And tells Will off in no uncertain terms. Okay. And then Will's and then the Hawkin stroke the walker buggers off, and the rooks come back. Okay. Going out caroling. Preferably the actors would be singing this. They go to the Greythorn Manor. And this is what's on the stereo. And then they time shift to the Victorian Ball. Okay. And then Will opens the book of Grammar. May I take your hand for this? Okay. And Victorian Ball comes back in. And then we time slip back to the present day. And then Will reaches into the fire to get the sign of wood. Okay. After this, essentially there's another half of the book to go, but this gives you a good idea of lighting and sound that I'll be using. Okay. And after this, documentation. Okay, thank you for listening. Okay, hope that answers as many questions as possible.